Hi, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 8, The Viper and the Mountain. Okay, so first off, I have to say, if there's one phrase that was going through my mind after this episode ended, it was, did not meet my expectations. In the end, though, I think I probably had my expectations too high, and that might have ruined it a bit for me. But overall, after I get over that, I have to admit this is one of the best episodes of the seasons. There were a lot of amazing moments in this episode, and I realized that when the credits ran, my whole body was tense. My hands were clenched into fists. My heart was beating really fast. I actually had to take time to relax my body, and it wasn't just the mountain fight. There was a lot of intensity in this episode. So if that's not a sign that this was a great episode, I don't know what is. But before I dissect this episode, let me first explain what I mean by it did not meet my expectations. There were three things I expected more of. First of all, the biggest disappointment, I think, is Ramsay's Snow plot to take Moat Cailin. I expected so much more of that. I thought Theon, or Reek rather, would have to go undercover and play the long game and stuff like that. But the words that describe the takeover of Moat Cailin the best, I think, would be Darth Vader quote, which is all too easy. It just happened way too fast. It was even worse than Daenerys' takeover of Marine. The second thing I found disappointing was the build-up of the wildling attack on the wall, or lack thereof, I should say. I'll talk more about that later, but everything seems to indicate that next week's episode is going to be a huge Blackwater-type battle at the wall, where the entire episode is devoted to just that. And I'm not feeling particularly psyched for that battle. With Blackwater, they did a lot of great setup to get you really excited and pumped for it. But yeah, I'm just not feeling pumped with this wall battle. I expected more than just a scene with Jon Snow talking to his buddies about how they, how screwed they are. I wanted more of a build-up than that, which we still might get in the next episode before the battle actually happens. But I think I should be more pumped for that episode than I am. And the third thing is I also wanted more build-up for the mountain fight with Oberyn. I actually wanted to see what other people's reactions were to Oberyn being Tyrion's champion and what Cersei would say. Maybe she'd try to talk him out of it. Really, I was expecting at least like 20-minute build-up to this epic battle, which was supposed to be like the centerpiece of the episode, but they didn't even come to it until there was only like 15 minutes left in the episode. And instead, they give us this boring beetle speech, which was one of the most disappointing Tyrion scenes, in my opinion. Alright, so let's get into specifics. First of all, we start off with the invasion of Moldtown. I love this scene. Everything about it was done right. The setup of how Moldtown is basically there for rogue night watchmen to have a good time, and how nobody liked Gilly, and how Gilly is still wildling at heart because she knew the attack was coming. But most of all, I love the resolution. When I saw this preview for this episode, I was afraid that Gilly would meet her maker, which would have upset me. But it looks like she's makes it out alive, and on top of that, Sam thinks she's dead and blames himself, which he jolly well should. What kind of idiot takes someone to this slime hole to keep her safe? What a moron. But she doesn't deserve to die for his stupidity, but he does deserve to feel like shit for it. Anyway, I almost expected her to give Ygritte some wildling sign to let her know she's a wildling. But I think Ygritte, maybe she could tell that she was a wildling, because we've seen Ygritte kill women and children before. So I don't know. I don't think she would spare her unless she knew she was a wildling, but I could be wrong about that. So next we get more on Grey Worm's budding romance with Melisandre, or Missandre. I always get her name confused with Melisandre. But I think, yeah, Missandre. And they make it kind of ambiguous as to whether or not, Grey Worm still has a pillar or not. I was kind of hoping that they would answer this, but alas, no dice. Overall, I'll say if they end up going somewhere with this storyline. It could be interesting. If not, it's kind of a waste of time, but we'll see. Alright, so then there was the Theon takeover of Kaelin. As I said before, I was not very impressed with this. In my episode review of episode 6, when Yara attacked the Dreadfort and tried to rescue Theon, I said I really liked that scene because it was cool to see Yara and Ramsay go at it. But ultimately, I think that ended too quick as well. So ultimately, I think they're not giving the Greyjoy Bolton storyline enough play this season. I know a lot of people aren't all that interested in the storyline, but if they're not going to do it right, maybe they shouldn't do it at all. Seems like we're only getting the bullet points on this plot line. Everything happens, way too easy. There's no real conflict. So I think they kind of blundered this a bit, which was kind of a disappointment after that awesome scene with Ramsay in episode 2 when Theon was shaving him. But that was written by George R.R. Martin, so it seems like other writers couldn't live up to that. And overall, I think the show producers didn't really put enough thought into the storyline, and all of a sudden they said that the Greyjoys are retreating and defeated, but why? I know why it's the case in the books, but that same reason doesn't apply in the show, and they don't really explain what's happening. But it was cool to see Ramsay get his full Bolton, become a full Bolton. So we'll see where this goes. Alright, so next we get Sansa testifying at Lord Baelish's little inquiry over Lysa Arryn's death. And this scene was awesome. For 4 years, people have been waiting for Sansa to show some kind of smarts and not be the whiny idiot girl. And finally, we get the payoff. All season, people have been telling me she's gonna get more cunning, and they've been pointing out some minor things she's been doing that shows she's getting a bit smarter. But I wasn't really buying it until now. That was it was so awesome when she manipulated the situation, almost better than Littlefinger did. She completely got him out of the situation he was in, and all the time she spent with Cersei, and the recent time she spent with Littlefinger, and maybe even her time she spent with Tyrion, it must be all rubbing off with her. She's learning sort of how to play the Game of Thrones and become more cunning. That look she gave Littlefinger to let him know how badass she was, and how she's playing those people, that was really cool. And when she came down the stairs looking all dressed up and looking all badass, that was awesome. And it looks like Littlefinger's going to try to put the veil into play finally. In what form? We probably won't find that out until next season, but it's exciting. And next we get another huge scene with lasting implications. Jorah is asked to make like a tree and get out of here. I had actually read a while ago that this happened in the books, but since it happened under entirely different circumstances in the books that were totally different in the show, and also had already passed this point, I didn't think they were going to do it at all in the show. In fact, I was really hoping that they wouldn't. But I once said that sometimes the show takes a different path from the book, but arrives at the same destination sometimes. And this is an example of that, because Jorah is out of here. I'm particularly bummed about it. I didn't want to see him go, but yeah, what can you do? But more than that, I think that was a really bad move on Daenerys' part. It was like amateur hour. It was another amateur hour sign that she didn't really know what she's doing, and she's going to come, and all this is going to come back and bite her in the ass. She's letting her emotions override her good judgment. Because for one, Jorah was totally right that she was playing right into Tywin Lannister's hand. She's giving him exactly what he wants. I remember a few episodes back we saw Tywin writing letters, and I was like, oh fuck, what's gonna happen now? Because when Tywin starts writing letters, you know some bad shit's gonna go down. And now we see the result. I bet he was banking on Daenerys' inexperience to win over her better judgment, and he was right. When Jorah asked Barrister where he got the letter, he said, oh, does it matter? Jorah should have been like, yes, hell yes, it matters. You're being played. So Barrister Selmy is letting his jealousy of Jorah override his better judgment as well, because not only did he not counsel her against it, but he seemed like he was pushing for it. So he's failed as well. I wonder had Dario been there, if he would have actually spoken some sense to her. Because not only is she playing right into Tywin's hand, but it's obvious he is loyal as fuck to her. He may have started out as a spy, but he saved her ass so many times. She would be dead if it wasn't for him. And without him, she's weaker, and Tywin's banking on that. So I'm convinced this is the start of her downward spiral to destruction, because that was a very bad move on her part. And it's, I think it's kind of ironic that she's okay with Barrister Selmy, sticking around, even though he was actually working for King Robert back at the same time where, Jorah was a spy. Granted, he didn't directly betray her the way he did, but still, you gotta look past the past indiscretions when you can tell that the person is presently devoted to you. So, Arya and the Hound. I did not expect them to get to the Vale. I was quite shocked when they actually showed up to the Bloody Gate. I was convinced that something bad was going to happen before they actually got there. I'm really eager to find out if they're still going to go to the Eyrie, or if Arya is actually going to run into Sansa. But now it's finally been officially announced that Arya is alive, so I wonder if this will become common knowledge. And Arya's reaction when it was announced that her aunt was dead was priceless. It was so awesome. Everything in her life was just going to shit, and pretty much everyone related to her is dying. She's just gotten used to it. And when that was announced, it was just the funniest thing to her. Also, I think she was kind of laughing at the Hound, because his big plan he spent all this time on just got totally fucked up. But I'm really eager to see where they're going to go next. So finally we get Tyrion, and I don't know about you, but when I was watching this scene when he was talking about his beetle smashing cousin, I was practically screaming, "Get to the fight! Get to the fight!" I personally thought this was one of the most pointless scenes. I get, what they were trying to say about all the killing having no purpose, but I felt like this was kind of a distracting point that really didn't add anything to the current events of the episode. Plus, it took way too long. And, if they were going to do this, they're fine, but they spent way too much time on it. So towards the end of the scene, I was pretty much just screaming, "Get on with it! Get on with it!" But I like how Jaime was the one to mention there's no word for killing a cousin, because Jaime has killed his own cousin. Anyway, the big fight. So this had a real tortoise and the hare feel to it. Not that the mountain could be compared to a tortoise by any stretch of the imagination, but that actually made it worse. It was totally Oberyn's overconfidence that was his undoing. Even Jaime and Tyrion weren't sure if Oberyn could beat the mountain, and I like how they mentioned that Oberyn was so damn sure that he could. And and just the nonchalant attitude he had before the battle. In his mind, there wasn't even the slightest chance that he could lose. He was just totally sure that there was no other outcome than him defeating the mountain and winning. And I think it was Jorah Mormont who once said that only a fool has no fear before going into a battle. And that's especially true if the one who you're going into battle against is the fucking mountain. So Oberyn was a fool, basically. He took the battle, if he took the battle more seriously, if he actually was afraid of the mountain, he would have just finished them off, or maybe would be more on his guard instead of getting, overconfident and let his guard down and letting the mountain get the better of him. It always makes me think that Tyrion would have been better off with Bronn. Bronn may not be as skilled of a fighter as Oberyn, but if he did manage to get the better of the mountain, Bronn would have he would have taken it more seriously, and he would have simply killed the mountain instead of fucking around the way Oberyn did. In fact, it wasn't so good for Tyrion that Oberyn wasn't in it for Tyrion. He was in it for himself. Because if he really cared about saving Tyrion, he would have just finished off the mountain when he had the chance. One thing that a lot of people online aren't really mentioning is, regardless of any spoilers or anything like that, just from what we've seen in this episode alone, you can tell that the mountain is dead. I saw some people talk like, oh, I don't want to give anything away, but it's not a matter of giving away anything. You can clearly see here that the mountain is on his way out. Oberyn was actually worried that the mountain would die before he had a chance to confess. So, ironically, Oberyn got what he wanted. He killed the mountain and got him to confess his crime. He just wasn't counting on his skull being crushed as part of the bargain. So next week's episode, as I alluded to earlier, the talk around the campfire is that this will be an entire episode just devoted to the battle at the wall. In the preview for this episode, Bax's theory has it only has scenes from the wall. Personally, I hope that they slip in some other scenes, because I'm actually more interested in other storylines than I am the wall, but it doesn't look like they will. But, even though I'm not as psyched for the wall battle as I'd like to be, I'm still hoping that this is going to be a really awesome battle, but we'll see. So that's my review for the Viper and the Mountain. I'll be back next week doing the next episode of Watchers on the Wall. So I'll tell you what I think of that. Also, sometime this week I'll make my Red Wedding review, as I promised earlier. So keep an eye out for that, and thanks for watching.